So that really has taken you through a complete edit in Resolve. There is a lot more, of course, that you can learn. But the last thing I'd like to talk about here is what are the differences between the free version that I've been using and the studio version. Is it worth buying the full one? Truth is, there is an awful lot you can do with the free one. It's full of stuff, but there is some really nice stuff in the full version as well. A lot of them are different kinds of filters and things you could possibly live without. But firstly, I'm going to look at a couple of things that I use an awful lot. So the first thing is I've got an edit here, I'm busy watching it, and how can I see it? Obviously I can see it here, but I'd like to see it bigger. Well, in the free version of Resolve, you can pop up to the workspace here and go to Viewer Mode and choose Cinema Viewer, or just do Control F, and it'll pop it up full screen over the main interface. Only problem you got here is now you can't see the timeline. So you can play it, but you can't really do anything with it. Press escape and I'll get back to the interface, but what I really want to be able to do is to get at all the controls, open things like the inspector, so I can see a full screen preview whilst I'm adjusting stuff. With the free version, you can do that if you have a Blackmagic card. So for example, in this system, if I go to the preferences here, I can go to Monitor Device and set Intensity Pro. Because I've got an Intensity Pro in this computer, I can just select that. And now I can get a picture full screen out of the Intensity Pro onto a television. Now, to be honest, that's the best way of doing things because you get a proper video signal, which you can watch on a proper television. And since most people are still going to be watching your videos on a proper television, then that's the best way of monitoring it. But sometimes that's not possible. Say you've got a laptop. How can you plug something into a laptop? Well, if you've got Thunderbolt on the laptop, you can use a Thunderbolt Blackmagic device. But if you haven't got Thunderbolt, there isn't anything else. They used to do a USB shuttle, but they don't anymore. On a laptop, what do? I can plug a second screen in, but I can't pop the picture up full screen. With the studio version, you can. With the studio version, you can come up to Workspace and this thing, a Video Clean Feed. And if you've got a second monitor, like I have a second monitor on this computer, you can click on that, and now you can see the picture full screen on another monitor. So obviously I'm only filming the main screen here, but my second screen has got that on it as a huge picture, and I'm seeing it properly. It is only a computer screen, it's not quite in the right color space, the screen's probably running at 60 Hz, whereas my video's 50. On the other hand, if I don't have a Blackmagic, I've got that. And I could use that all the way through the program. If I come into Fusion, I wasn't going to mention Fusion, but it's a fancy compositing program that's built into the application, the whole thing works on nodes. But you're doing really complicated stuff in here, 2D, 3D, multiple layer composites, all sorts of things. It's nice to see that on a full screen whilst you're editing. Again, if you have a Blackmagic, you can do it. But if you have the studio version, you can use the full screen output to show whatever's happening in Fusion on the second screen. Happens all the way through the program. So that is a really great option I wouldn't do without, because I do edit on a laptop a lot. Also, I do things like these tutorials. These tutorials are only ever going to be seen on a computer, so I might as well watch it on a computer screen rather than a video screen. And I use that all the time. Wouldn't be without that, and that is not in the free version. Like I say, with the free version, you can still get a full screen output just using a Blackmagic card. Another very useful thing in the full version is up here under Decode options. And it's the fact that it can use different ways of decoding video. So it can use an nVidia card to help decode the video. If you've got a QuickSync processor, it can use QuickSync as well as nVidia to help decode the video. So if you're playing back H.264 or H.265, you get extra help and it'll play it better. You don't get that in the free version. That one, again, kind of a biggie for me because it makes the performance better. Another thing is that DaVinci's got this kind of neural engine, this AI engine, to help it do various things inside the program. This is only available in the studio version. And one of the things I do use it for is deinterlacing. So, for example, let's go to this clip here. This is an old Hi8 clip. It's DV, and I put it onto the timeline and I'm upscaling it. And if you look carefully at that, let's go full screen, you can see all these horrible jaggies around the edges of things, using the standard way of deinterlacing in Resolve that you get in the free version. Now, to be honest, that's comparable to other programs, pretty much the same as what ADS does and Premiere does, but you can get it better if you have the studio version. You can either go to an individual clip, open the retiming and scaling, but if I select that clip, which is an interlaced clip, I have deinterlaced quality. Let's make this a tad bigger so you can see it. So if I choose that, I've either got the standard one or I can go to high. You immediately see there those lines get a lot better, a lot less jaggy, or the neural engine, which does it slightly better. Can't really see, I think, on the display here the difference between high and neural engine, but if you watch it on a full screen, it is better. This is probably the best deinterlacing that I get inside any editing program. Now I can do it slightly better using an external program called StackSrip, and I did a video all about that. You can see on my YouTube channel. I even talk about getting stuff out of Resolve and popping it into that and doing it. So you could use that if you want to use the free version. On the other hand, it's a lot more hassle. You get the stuff off the timeline, you pop it into the other program, you deinterlace it, you bring it back. This you can do straight away on the timeline. So much quicker. And it does a very good job. Like I say, way better than just about every other editing program. And that diagonal there is what shows it off. When you're deinterlacing, effectively you've got a picture that's split into two halves, and you have to lose one of the halves. Question is, what do you do about it? Do you just dump it completely, or do you try and merge it with the other one? Well, this is more or less dumping it completely, which means you've lost half of the horizontal resolution, which is why you get jaggies like this. The high and the neural engine do a better job of merging the two together. Another one that's very useful in everyday stuff. There are other things that you can use the neural engine for. So for example, there is a thing called superscale, which is a better way of upscaling, and there are some color filters that use it. So for example, there's a thing called the magic mask, and the magic mask, you just sort of draw a line around something, and what Resolve tries to do is to isolate that something from everything else, and then you track it and it'll try and follow that around. That's actually very good at trying to isolate something like me there. I've just clicked this little button and it shows in red everything that it's masked out, and then I can get it to track it and it'll go through and try and follow that shape, and it does a fairly good job of being able to pull something out without having to mask it yourself manually. Now that's finished processing. You can see there I'm in pink has picked up a few other things, so I'd have to clean it up a little bit, but actually it's done a very good job of picking me out. I just have to minus off these bits if I wanted to. I could do all sorts of things like just make me black and white. If I invert the key, make everything else black and white apart from me. Again, this is all part of the color page, so there's a lot of things I'm not explaining properly here for you, but that gives you an idea. There are things like that that you simply cannot do without this neural engine. My favourite thing, like I said, the thing I use the most is this deinterlacing, because I am upscaling a lot of old footage. There was another AI feature added into Resolve 18 and 18.1, which was to do with clearing up sound. So for example, let's take this sound here, which comes from this tutorial. If I play it. Hello, my name is David Clarke from DVC Training. It's fairly clean. But let's have a look at this, which is one of the takes I did of me trying to talk to camera and failing miserably. Now I did have another mic, so I was using the sound from that, but this is the sound from the mic on the camera. Hello, I'm David Clarke from DVC Training. There's just a lot of hiss, there's a lot of other stuff going on here. I just fiddle around, take my glasses off, pick the mic up, that kind of thing. There's just a lot of other stuff going on, and I want to clean it up. Now obviously I could go for the noise reduction filter that I showed off in the sound section, but we've got this new thing which is an AI filter to isolate voices. So I'm going to select it, go up to this audio here, and here you can see you've got voice isolation. Click it, and then start playing. Hello, I'm David Clarke from DVC Training, and in this short... And you can see all that exterior noise. All these things here are me clonking a microphone as I pick it up and taking off glasses. All disappeared. Hello, I'm David Clarke from DVC Training, and in this short series of videos I'm going to be going through doing a let's turn it off. Complete edit inside of DaVinci Resolve. And you can hear some background noise. Turn it on. Now Resolve is a very comprehensive program. It's got editing, and most of that noise is gone. Like any filter, when you start treating stuff, sometimes it can mess things up slightly, so you do have a little slider here, so you can just decrease the amount of isolation. You'll bring some of the noise back in, and if you listen to my voice there, it sounded slightly tinny, but on the other hand, compared to what I had there originally, just for one click, it was really good, and it worked a lot better than the standard noise reduction filter. Now this kind of thing's been put into a lot of programs now. Adobe were recently showing off a beta of something they're putting into Audition. I actually have a plugin for Edius, which is from Acon, who does some of the other plugins that come with it, which is the same kind of thing. And in fact, most of this tutorial was edited using that filter That was another AI isolation filter. I didn't do it with this one because this one wasn't actually available when I started editing. But now you've got this one and it's built straight into Resolve. You don't have to buy any extra plugins. The other thing they've got is a dialogue leveler. Normally what I'd do is I'd take this and I'd put on a compressor which aims to bring down all the high areas and bring up all the low areas and level out the voice. And that works very well. This is another version of that, which I've had variable results with. So let's turn it off, play a bit. Hello, I'm David Clarke from DVC Training, and in this short series of videos, turn it on. There's a variety of different presets here, and I'm just going to go for optimize for most sources and see what it sounds like. Hello, I'm DVC Training, and in this short series of videos I'm going to be going through doing a complete edit inside of DaVinci Resolve. Now I have to admit I couldn't see much difference personally playing around with this compared to a compressor, but this voice isolation here makes an awful lot of difference, I think. So great little filter. Both of these AI things, they're like the other AI ones I use. Sometimes when you press the play button to play it, they don't kick in straight away. They'll always be there when you make the final file, it'll do everything, but sometimes it feels like it misses out the first couple of beats, or sometimes it takes a couple of seconds to go, because it's kicking in this artificial intelligence engine, which is then analysing the sound before playing it. But it's a nice thing, does a better job than standard noise reduction, and it's only in the studio version. To show you an extreme example, let's go for this one here, and we've got this guy here, I don't know who he is, trying to act menacing, and I'm just going to loop play that, and you can hear the original.
See what's happening inside. See what's happening inside. See what's happening inside.
Pretty awful, really. That's the original sound off the camera. We did actually have another mic, but I just thought I'd see what I could do by using the voice isolation on that. So popped it on. Let's press the play button again.
See what's happening inside. See what's happening inside. See what's happening inside.
Now if you compare that to the original, that is quite staggeringly better. Obviously not perfect, but you know how noisy that was in the first place? That's done a pretty good job of trying to rescue it. Now, personally, I would probably re-record that dialogue and put in a new version, which coincidentally, I would do in Resolve, because the Fairlight page, again, I haven't really gone into the Fairlight page, this Fairlight page has this whole lovely ADR section for re-recording dialogue, where you can type out a script and things pop up on screen with prompts and all sorts of things. I would personally re-record that dialogue because I have the option to do that. But if you don't, that actually cleaned up the original really, really well. So it's a very nice filter, and to say it comes with the studio version because it's an AI-based thing. Like all the other filters, you can use it on a track. So if I select the track as opposed to the clip, you see it appears as a track filter, or if I select just a clip, I can put it onto the clip. And of course, you can apply it in the Fairlight page if you go into that. Another very useful thing, which is again part of the color page, is noise reduction. So if you look at this particular clip, again, just pop that full screen, it's very noisy. Again, this is an old high-8 clip who's filmed in the dark and it's very noisy and I need to clean it up. Well, pop into the color page, go over to this little tab here and turn on temporal noise reduction. Now I happen to know that this particularly works better if I just set a large number of frames up the loomer. Again, not really explaining how to use this, but essentially done that, suddenly you can see how much cleaner it is. I mean, that is quite a staggering cleanup. Now, if I was in something like Edius or Premiere, I'd have to buy nVidia to do something similar. nVidia, I think, does a slightly better job than Resolve, but you have to pay extra for it as part of your editing program. Again, it's all in Resolve Studio. Those are things I really wouldn't want to live without. There are loads of other things as well. The studio version understands more types of files. So for example, somebody had a 10-bit MP4 file that they filmed on a Panasonic camera and it wouldn't load it because the free version didn't understand 10-bit MP4 files. It understood 8-bit ones, but not 10-bit ones. The full version understands them better. What you'll find with Resolve is if there's a clip it doesn't get, if you try and go to the media pool and then you go into a folder with some clips it just doesn't understand, it won't show you anything at all. Whereas there might be other clips in there, but if Resolve doesn't get it, it won't show them at all. You could try dragging them in from Explorer, they won't work either that way. And like I said, the free version doesn't support some of the more advanced formats of things like MP4. Does support a lot of stuff, so obviously I've been loading things like AVC HD, DV, huge amounts of stuff, but the full version does more. There's also various filters that aren't supported by the free version, which I do use quite a bit. Now, one of the reasons I do use Resolve for some of my projects is that some of my projects have got a large amount of 3D stuff in them. I use a 3D program called Blender and I create all these animations which I then want to do something with. Well, Resolve is really, really good at playing animations. So here, for example, I've got temporary animation not quite finished. And if you look at that, it's been rendered out as a series of PNG files, which is the standard way I do things from 3D programs. I want to bring that in and use it as a video clip. Now, at the moment, if I go to that folder, you notice I've got lots and lots and lots of different individual shots, which is what you generally see in something else. But if you go up to these little dots up here and you go to frame display mode, and if you tick sequence as opposed to individual, it'll immediately show me that as a video clip, which really just saves so much more time than all the other programs where you'd have to go there, click the import as image sequence, import them and get them in there. With this, you just pop, play, job done. Love it. But there's a lot of other things that I find very useful to go with CG stuff as well. If you're not doing CG, you won't really care about any of this. So if I just bring that in, and I'm just going to make a new timeline out of it. Well, if you're lucky, it plays it back. With CG, I like to do things like add motion blur. There is a very simple thing under the color page called motion blur, which you can add. I can just stick it on better, whack it up, and then play it, and I get a fairly decent motion blur straight away, which, if my graphics card is up to it, plays back in real time. That's not in the free version of Resolve. There are lots of extra filters which you get using the full version. Now, these are things which you generally would apply in the color page. Some of these things, actually like the motion blur and the noise reduction, I can actually put on as filters in the edit page. A bit earlier, I could have just popped in here, found the motion blur, dragged it, dropped it onto a clip, and then gone to effects and blurred it up. You might use the motion blur on real footage as opposed to CGI. For example, one of the ways to help with chroma keying is when you film it, to film it on a high shutter speed. So, normally if you're filming something at 25 frames a second, you stick your shutter speed to 50, but put it on 200 or 300 or something a lot higher. And you'll get crisper, cleaner edges because things won't be as motion blurred. It looks a bit staccato when you play it back, but it's better for keying. If you've got motion blur, what you can do is you can key it and then add motion blur afterwards so it gets back the motion blur, but you get a better key out of it. There is another way of doing motion blur, which you can do with the free version, but it only works on CGI footage, not real footage. That's in the Fusion page. Now, I haven't really touched on the Fusion page before, and I don't want to lose you too much, so I won't go too in depth into what I'm doing here, but I'll just quickly show you this filter called the Vector Motion Blur. But I pop that on there. I can then load in the vectors. So when you render out something in a 3D program, you can get it to save the movement information, and you can then pop that into here, and then you can actually shove a motion blur on it using that information. So you can vary how much the thing actually gets blurred in post-production, which is incredibly useful and time-consuming if you're doing 3D animations. If you've got the studio version, things like the motion vector blur will actually use the graphics card to do a lot of the processing, whereas in the free version it won't use the graphics card. Other things which are in the studio version, there's just a whole lot of extra filters. Again, I could apply them from here. I'm going to pop into the color page because that works as a better place to apply some of these things. And they are things like face refinement. So if I go to the list of effects, I'm going to click on that and I get up a list of effects and I'm going to look for face refinement. And I'm going to drag that, pop it onto the clip. You can't see anything at the moment, but that's because I have to get it to analyze it. So click the analyze button and wait for it to go through and try and work out where the eyes, the mouth, the nose and everything else is. Yep, done that. Okay, let's turn off the overlay and zoom into me a little bit so you can see me a bit better. Let's turn off a couple of bits and pieces so I've just got a bigger view of me. Again, this is another thing I actually really like in Resolve, is I'm just using the middle mouse wheel to zoom in and out of the display window up there, which just helps me to see stuff. But having worked out where all the bits are, I can now come down to here and go to the eyes, and let's brighten my eyes up. Let's get rid of my eye bags. Definitely, those eye bags are far too big, David. Let's make my lips a lot redder. Yeah, I've got a bit of lippies on there. Smooth out my moustache. Add in a bit of blusher. Okay, I'm going a bit bonkers here. But you can see there, I've been able to touch up the face. Doing a pretty good job of keeping all that going. You got a shiny face, remove the shine. Or add in some shine. Let's go for the automatic beauty mode there and just get rid of some of my wrinkles. There we are. Getting ready for RuPaul's Drag Race, I think, and playing in real time on this system. Now, this is not the most up-to-date system. It's using a 9th generation processor, and the 13th generation came out at the end of last year. And I'm using an nVidia 1060, and it's playing that back for me in real time in HD. Let's come into this clip, and I'm going to use something called the patch replacer. So the way that the color page works is that you have a series of nodes, which you won't be used to if you're using other programs, but they're a bit like layers of effects. So that's the bottom layer. I'm going to color nodes and add a serial node, which sticks another one afterwards. It's a bit like another layer. Then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look for the patch replacer. Now the patch replacer will take something from one area and put it somewhere else. And I think what I'm going to do here is I am going to try and get rid of that control panel, which is more a rectangle really. Let's make it a bit smaller. Okay, I'm going to put that there, that there. I have now got rid of that rectangle. The fact that this has got a static shot means I got away with it, but you can get it to motion track it so it'll follow it around. And obviously there's loads of other options in there for this kind of thing. By the way, if you're on a single screen and you've got these little overlays up because they help you when you're trying to line them up, but I actually want to see the thing, well, I could try going full screen and it gets rid of the overlays, and you can see, yeah, there's a little bit of a line around there. So maybe I need to fiddle a bit more. Or on a single screen, you can pop over to this little thingamajig here, and if you click on that little drop down, it shows you all sorts of different kind of overlays. So if I'm in the Open FX effects, which is what they call these things, I can see the overlays that go with that. These little boxes, well, I can get them off and they're not there anymore. Again, lots of things here which I haven't touched on in the rest of the tutorial, but you'll learn as you go along. That's great. Things like the patch replacer. There's also another one which I do use an awful lot when I'm cleaning up old footage. Now let's have a look at this little bit of clip here that I've isolated, and there, see, I've got a massive dropout because it came from high 8 originally and there's a problem with the original tape. I can fix that by using something called the Dust Buster. Pop that on the clip, draw a rectangle over it, and it's gone. That dropout lasted 1 frame, so I needed something that applied to that particular frame. I'm going to click on that, press the play button. You can see there that white box only appears for 1 frame, but it's got rid of that dropout. Bosh. Like magic. Of course, doesn't work absolutely every time. I did a whole thing on this in my cleaning up old footage tutorial, so have a look on my YouTube channel for that. But something like that is just incredibly useful when you're cleaning up old footage. There's also a lovely flicker fixer. If you've got something with a bit of flicker on it, I put the flicker fixer on it, it just fixed it. Here's another one I particularly like. I've got a piece of footage here. Again, this is something I filmed a long time ago with an extreme wide angle lens. Look at that bend. These are straight. If you look further down, they do that. They do not do this. Full version. Pop in here, go to lens correction, analyze it. Oh, it nearly got it right. Look at that. That's before, after. If I'm not happy with the results, just fiddle with this until you get the results that you want. So this clip's 4:3, that's why I've got black lines down there, so I could just whack it up full screen. But yeah, look at that. Other filters I use quite a bit. Just pop to the color page on this one, and I am going to look for Apperture diffraction. And what that does is add a glow on things. Zoom into this a bit more. I've just added it on there, and immediately I'm getting a nice glow on the whites around here. And obviously there's loads of ways that you can change things here, so I can come in here and just say, yeah, let's only go for things which are a certain amount of brightness. You might even notice there I'm getting kind of star effect on it. I can change the star effect so I get different types of effects, or make it rounder. I mean, I just love this effect. I use it a lot on CGI because it adds a nice little glow to it, but I can also see it being used, say, on a wedding video to add a nice little romantic glow to stuff. Again, that one's a studio-only version. Also, I like to sometimes add in lens reflections. I always think they come in a bit too much, but I'll just come down to the global blend and turn them down a bit. Again, it's great for CGI. It adds in a lens reflection based on the image. So I'm getting a lens reflection down here of the bright stuff at the top. I use that a lot on CGI to make it look a little bit more realistic. Another one that I like, lens flares. You can do motion tracking inside of here, so if I wanted to, I could motion track that lens flare to be down the end of the corridor and it would move around with it. Maybe that's the thing for another tutorial. And you've got a bunch of different presets in here, but you can change all this stuff. Let's go back to the basic one. You come down to here and you've got something called elements, and I've got full screen glare, so I can make it white out the whole screen. I can go for the spot, so the spot on the moment is yellow. Let's change it to purple, I don't know, whatever you feel like. And you can change the softness. Then you can come down here and choose the starburst and see how much of the starburst you actually want. I don't really like the starburst. And come down to the ghosts and just, there we are, I'm getting a ghost on there. Oh, that's a bit much. Change whether it's disc strake or, and yeah, all this stuff. There's just loads and loads of lovely customization here. Like I said, I can motion track it, so it just stayed on the end there. Love it. I was actually trying to do a thing for a customer the other day, which was a 3D logo, and I was just trying to update it to be 4K, and their logo was a globe with a lens flare going across it. They use After Effects and Premiere. Premiere's got 3 very basic lens flares and nothing else. And suddenly, if you want to do it with Premiere, you've got to actually buy another program. You've got to go off and buy Boris or something that's going to add in some decent lens flares so that you can do a lens flare with it. Studio version of Resolve's got it in there. In the free one, you can do some lens flares with Fusion, but I find these ones are better. Fusion lens flares I find to be slightly confusing. If you have a look at videos on Resolve 18, they'll be going on about the depth map. So the depth map is something that you can shove onto a clip. Let's try me. They've done a bit of analyzing, and from that, it's trying to work out the depth of the image. It's done a pretty good job of picking me out. So if I turn it off, you can see that you've got me and you've got the background. And yep, it's done a pretty good job of finding me. And of course, I can do things like refine this. I could use that as a mask. So now that it's worked out where I am, I can use it as a mask to maybe put something behind me. So I could use that to separate me out. That's a new thing in 18. I haven't really used it very much. But if you look at any tutorials about 18, people are loving this. Masking is one of the most annoying things possible inside any program, and anything that makes it easier is wanted. Depth map works sometime, magic mask. Obviously you've got regular masking, which is all in here as well, but magic mask and depth map, really very, very useful stuff. On the export, if you get the studio version, you do have the option here of using different types of encoders. So here you can see I've got the standard encoder, which is the native one, which is okay. So I'm talking about making MP4 files here. You've got the standard encoder, which is okay, but not brilliant at low bit rates. Or you can use an nVidia card, or if you've got QuickSync enabled, you can use QuickSync. You don't get those options if you have the free version. nVidia will do a much better job. QuickSync will do a faster job. Of course, you can always export it as something and then encode it with another program like Handbrake. Another thing that you get with the studio version is you can add other encoders. So with the H.264 here, if I pop to that, obviously you've got H.264 and H.265. And if you're doing H.265, you really, really want to be using nVidia because it will be a lot faster than native. But you do have this other option because I've put in an extra plugin, which is actually free. And it does X.264. X.264 is widely regarded as one of the best ways of doing MPEG-4 files. If you use a program like Handbrake, that's what it uses. And you can do that straight off the timeline with a free plugin that you can find from the Blackmagic website. Now again, if I don't have that, I would export it as a movie, very probably a Grass Valley AVI, and then pop it into Handbrake and let Handbrake do it. And Handbrake would do the same job. If you want to do it straight off the timeline, you can do it here, but only in the studio version. A couple of other things I haven't mentioned that I won't show you, but are very important if you need them. In the studio version, you can do bigger than UHD. So UHD is 3840 by 2160. There is another format of 4K which you're going to use if you want to do films, which is slightly bigger. You can't do that unless you use the studio version. You can't do 8K and things. It actually goes up to 32K, which I've never attempted to use. But you can do bigger than 4K. Actually, for myself, 4K is good enough. 4K on a TV is the biggest I'm going to edit, so I'm quite happy with that. If you get the studio version, you can do bigger. Also, you can do stereoscopic projects. So if you're filming in 3D, you can edit 3D using the studio version. You can't edit 3D if you're using the free version. And there are other things. Like I said, there's lots and lots and lots of stuff. But what I try to do there is give you a flavour of some of the really useful things that are in the studio version, so you can consider whether you actually want to buy it or not. If you try and use any of those, with most of them, you'll just get this up on screen, which is giving you a chance to have a look at it, but it'll print out with a great big watermark all over it. Some of the things like loading up some of the file formats just plain won't work. Any of the effects, they will produce this kind of watermark. And then once you get the studio version, they'll actually work. The studio version isn't that expensive. I don't sell Resolve, so you can't get it through me, but it's only about £250. And once you've bought it, at least up until now, they haven't charged for any upgrades. So I actually got my version of Resolve when I bought a Blackmagic cinema camera about 10-ish years ago, and I have never paid for an upgrade. I've started out on version 9 and I'm now on version 18 without paying for a single upgrade. Maybe one day they'll change that, but they haven't so far. It's been free upgrades all the way. My advice if you're thinking about Resolve, obviously after working through my tutorial so you know a bit about the editing, is try out the free version, see if you like it, and then decide if you want to pay for those extras. You can have the studio version on 2 different computers, and you can always move it around by activating and deactivating from the menu up here. Haven't had any problems with that, and I use lots and lots of different computers. So anyway, I hope that you found this introduction to Resolve useful. Like I've said on each of these chapters, if you want, you can buy a compiled version of everything off my website, so everything will be there with a nice little interface, so you can just keep it stored on your hard drive without having to pop back to YouTube. It's only £20, so please pop to my website if you want to order that. The content is exactly the same. I just gave you that as an option so that A, if you want to support me, you can give me a little bit of money for it, and B, you can have a version which is nice to refer to all the time. I will be doing more Resolve tutorials in the future, and I will still carry on doing Edius tutorials. Edius is still my favourite program for doing nice, quick editing. Do like Resolve. I particularly get into Resolve, like I said, because I'm doing lots of CGI, I'm doing lots of effects work, and it's all there in Resolve staring me in the face. There are things about it which are great, there are things about it which are annoying. I might do another video where I compare the good things and the bad things about Resolve and Edius, and say one of the reasons why I do some edits in Edius as opposed to Resolve, for those of you who are Edius fans, because there are plenty of times when I'll use Edius for a job rather than Resolve. But to be perfectly honest, there's one thing that no other program can be Resolve for, and that's for how much stuff you can get for not paying any money. All you need is a decent computer and a decent graphics card. If you haven't got a decent graphics card, you'll find Resolve is a bit of a pain in the neck and will probably keel over and just not work for you at all. But if you have a decent graphics card, like I said, in this one I've got a 1060. When did 1060s come out? So my 1060 came out in 2016 and it's now 2022. So that's not the most up-to-date graphics card. Works really well with Resolve. I've got another system that's got a 2080 in. It does more in real time, but I've not had it keel over using my 6GB 1060. I have had it keel over using a 2GB graphics card on a laptop. And even though they say it works really well on Intel graphics cards, I haven't had much good results with those either. So as long as your system's up to it, give it a go. There's a lot of good stuff about it. Just like everything else, not perfect. In my opinion, it's not very good at making interlaced output. You can take interlaced stuff, you can deinterlace it nicely, you can make it in progressive. If you want to make interlaced stuff, you want to make DVDs and Blu-ray discs, probably not the best option for you. If you want to get my tutorial, just please visit my website. If you want to know more about all the tutorials and training that I do, or you want me to make a system for you, then please visit my website, www.dvctraining.co.uk. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.